show.
It doesn't matter. We get most of our views afterwards anyway.
Oh shit, they could hear us.
That's right.
I'm
it's
teasing.
not Nox Mente.
I'm teasing without some kind of goofiness, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Melissa Martell. She's an artist, author, podcaster, and paranormal researcher. In addition to her own podcast called Drawing Out the Spirits, Melissa has been a frequent guest on Where Did the Road Go? And a few others like Conspiranormal, and I forgot that third one you told me already. Rojan's
Project Archivist.
Project Archivist. So, thank you, Melissa. Welcome to the show. So happy to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
This is great, Melissa. Welcome to Nox Mente and discussions of altered states of consciousness.
Thank you for having me. It's a fascinating show.
Let's just dig in. I'm going to jump in. So, when we think about the trajectory of life, we go from, generally we go from our birth to our death, those 2 points. And then somehow in that process, there is this 0 point where death is birth in essence. And part of what I've personally been weaving together with the Nox Mente show is how similar these things are and how dreams really tie it all together. So if you could give us a little insight into your earliest memories that stick up. And so they can just be awkward, they can be mundane, they can if you could weird, like colors, images, and then move into maybe some pop culture stuff on TV that maybe affected you, stuff that still sticks out that's way back.
Oh boy.
Let's go down.
My memory has gotten like pretty poor lately, and like I'm so in the now. I don't remember any dreams before 5 years old. I would say, like I don't have any conscious.
Well, it doesn't have to be dreams. Things, actual
things.
things that stick out.
Oh, things.
Like colors, your mother's hands.
What cartoons did you watch on Saturday mornings?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of TV. My early childhood was moving around a lot, so it's probably why things are fleeting and I don't have solid memory. So it was always moving from place to place to place. I had like 5 schools in grade 1. So I might remember a cat like when I was really, really young, or my mom buying me chocolate milk when I was like 3, like something really, maybe something like that. It would have just been me or my mother, and we just moved around a lot. That was just how we were a little nomadic in the early years.
Oh, I like that. Did you and your mother, are these good memories?
Some are good, some are not. And it's challenging, especially in the early 80s, to be a single parent. And so some are not like, some are like stressful memories, and some are good memories. You're a little more free, you're not as rigid, and so there's good and bad, I guess, with everything.
Yeah, true. It just sounded sweet. What about, were there things you loved when you were young, like toys or playing in nature?
I liked my grandfather. Actually, now I'm having. See, you got to talk to me a little bit.
Yes.
Jog my brain, right? At first it's rigid. It's like, no.
We'll get there.
That's the way it goes.
My grandfather had woods in the back of his house, and I used to like running out in the woods a lot. And toy-wise, I remember. I don't know if you remember those things that like they're like a music box. I probably had it from when I was a baby, but I remember it when I was about 4. And I used to it was a box, and you would wind up this little dial on it, and it would play music, and there was this little slot where the images would move on it. For some reason, I was fascinated with that when I was really little.
Oh, wow. I do remember those.
Yeah, really old, and like really old record players.
Yeah.
I used to carry around with like little tiny.
The little plastic ones?
No, they were like, they were maybe the plastic ones, but they're like, instead of the big records, they were the smaller ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had my own portable record player.
Plastic ones, right?
Yeah.
They were like cookies, almost.
Yeah.
You just brought back a memory I haven't had in ages. I'm writing it down.
Did you ever? I'm going to try and find some of those records now. Did you ever play any instruments? Was your interest in music strictly as a listener, as a consumer?
For me, I played piano when I was young for a little bit, but I could never focus on anything for a long time because we moved around too much. So that was the issue, and I didn't have that. That's the problem with the lack of focus and structure is you have a trouble focusing on things because it's a little chaotic. But I did play piano for a while, and I could teach myself how to play songs, but I've long since lost that talent. It's just not there anymore.
And regardless of what anyone says, it's not like riding a bike.
No.
The woods at your grandfather's house, did you play in them a lot?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, today nobody goes outside, but that's all you did. We didn't even have. You would have maybe had a small black and white TV, with 3 channels, and so you wouldn't have even thought to sit around and watch TV. You just would have been outside and in the woods all day. And in fact, actually, my earliest dream memory is of in a nightmare in those woods, ironically.
Oh, do you remember any details from it?
Oh, yeah, I do. It's funny because it's one of the dreams I remembered my whole life. I can't remember lots of other dreams, but it's one of the dreams that I remember my whole life. I don't know if it reflects like the chaos or moving around a lot, but I was, we were living with my grandfather at the time. Because for whatever reason, I don't know. And in this dream, everybody is talking about it. It kind of reminded me of this movie like Silver Bullet, but that movie wasn't out yet.
I fucking love that movie, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Where everybody's going to get the werewolf, like all the people are going into the woods to look for it. That's actually what it kind of reminds me of, except for it's some kind of monster that's getting children, and everybody's going to go into the woods to look for it. And it just happens to be these woods in the back of my grandfather's house. And for whatever, I'm going with these adults at this age, and they're looking for this monster, and they're looking for something big, like something like a zombie or a werewolf. I don't know what it is they're actually looking for, but that's not what the monster looks like. And I can see it's taking on the shape of things in the woods. So I see it's a rock, but its eyes are in the rocks. A giant rock, and it's the rock, but they can't see it because they're looking for something else, and it's just hiding as the rock. And I'm going like, it's the rock, but nobody's listening. And so we all leave and we go back to a house. It's not my grandfather's house, and everybody's sitting there. And they're talking about this monster, and I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm trying to tell them, well, it was there, and they're ignoring me. And all of a sudden, my mother looks up at me and goes, "Oh my God, it's behind you!" And it goes and grabs me. And then I wake up. I literally wake up from screaming right out of bed, nightmare, like 4.5 or 5, and that was my dream in those woods. I total nightmare, like, and the dream never ever left me for my entire life. I always remember it, and it was one of those dreams that just never left my memory. For
I really
36 years.
Girl, I love this. And I'm really into right now spirit and matter, like as rock formations and mountain formations that look like things. And so this is kind of on topic for me. Did it affect your relationship with those woods?
Wait, I got a synchro here.
No, actually, it didn't. It just showed me that adults don't see things properly. I'm like, don't trust those adults. They just don't know what bad people look like.
Yes. Valuable lesson. Jerry, what was your synchro?
I was just watching this show on the Devil's Gate Dam, I think, in Pasadena. Is it Devil's Gate or Devil's Head? There's a giant devil's head in the rock formation, and there's a cave there. It's where Parsons used to do rituals. Jack Parsons.
Yes. That is, yeah, it's like, it's kind of a conversation happening right now, Melissa, about spirit and density of matter, and how all these mountains and rocks and cliffs and all this stuff, not glyphs, just natural formations that actually look like something. They look like heads or dogs and cats. And so there's a lot of talk around it right now that's very interesting. Oh. That kind of plays into it. I love this early dream. So it didn't affect your relationship in the woods. It taught you intensely fierce lesson about adults.
Yes. I was more concerned about the adults, not the woods.
Yeah. Man, that's great. Was it just that one dream? Did it ever recur?
No, it was not a recurring dream, thankfully. Or if it was, I might have started to have trouble with the woods.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
definitely.
never reoccurred, but I never forgot it, and it was just so it just stuck in my mind. It was it's hard to explain a dream. It's hard to explain the feeling that monstrous, nightmarish figure gave you. Like, it's hard to express that, but it was quite like how you feel kind of in the dream as a child. You feel like you're really powerless, and all these adults that are supposed to have the control, they're supposed to have it, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you're telling them what they need to be doing, but they're not listening. And so it's hard. I think it's hard, like, you know how we have dreams sometimes, and it's so terrifying when we wake up and we're really upset, but when we retell it, it's like no one can really understand, because it doesn't actually logically sound terrifying, but you felt terrified in the dream. And so that's, I think, kind of how it played out, because it's like, so what? The rock had eyes. It wasn't just about the rock had eyes. It was the atmosphere and what that feeling of that energy, that villainous monster, what it was going to do to me.
Well,
Right?
and then it actually has resolution, because your mother actually sees it at the end behind you.
But it's too late.
Yes.
That was the problem. She sees it when it's too late.
Yes, but there is still like that resolution. Then you kind of become it in a strange way. That's a really good one. You said it was about between 4 and 5 years old.
Yeah, I'm probably closer to 5 now that I think about it. But that's like, I'm sure I had dreams before that, but even though as time goes on, it's only the really intense ones, the vivid ones that you remember.
Well, and we talk about this a lot, because really you're no different really than your memory of dreams or dreams, right? It's also intangible.
She does that
it
sometimes.
Almost falls into the same bucket. I do what?
Like disappear.
Did I disappear?
You did, but we don't mention it.
We don't mention it. Cut out for a second.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
We don't tell her.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'm just now getting illumination. Okay, and so you grew up in Canada, right?
Yep. I grew up in Canada. I had that dream on the East Coast, but I now live on the West Coast. Like just above like Washington State.
Oh, you're close to me. That's excellent. I love this part of the world.
It's fantastic. Yeah,
isn't it? We're lucky, I feel.
Yeah,
in the San Juan Islands, this whole area.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, okay, so just tying in the nature thing, are you still a nature person?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not as nature-y. I've been, tamed to the indoor and working, but I mean, I'm surrounded by woods and ocean, so I go out on hikes in the woods still. I don't get to do as much as I'd like to, because of, working and responsibility as an adult. But I still go out in the woods and go for little hikes here and there. It's 5 minutes to the ocean. It's 5 or 10-minute drive to the woods. It's 20-minute drive to a mountain, so you can go hiking there. So I'm surrounded by nature. It's not hard to access.
Yeah, people that haven't ever been up in this area, up in the upper Pacific Northwest, don't understand that it is actually all nature. Like the cities are just kind of plopped in the middle, and the nature is like almost overcomes them. So it's hard to. I like to get that on record just for clarity for everyone, so they get an image of it. Okay, and so in this earlier period of your life, moving more into like your teens and stuff, do you remember dreaming at this period? Like, when do you actually start having memories of dreams?
Well, I definitely had dreams that were trouble. Like, usually the dreams that I remember are always either I always kind of divide them up into like there are forewarning dreams, the dreams where I'm just, you know, sorting out information casually from the day. Those ones, they're gone. Like I will never remember, and I'm too heavy of a sleeper to get up and write dreams down. Me and my son, we just sleep like logs. So I usually have either forewarning, prophetic dreams, or just symbolic inner journey dreams. And you know, because I mean, the universe, in my opinion, speaks in symbols.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
or the nightmares. And I mean, probably the reason why I can only remember like nightmarish dreams is because they're the most vivid, and they imprint yourself in the memory. And I'm not one to get up and write stuff down.
Yeah.
So fleeting dreams that are just small, I tend to forget. But I would have, like, I had a friend when I was young who, when I was a teenager, who came to me and said she was being abused, and I had called child services and asked what their opinion was. And that whole episode of dealing with her being removed from her house caused me like really bad nightmares, and I would get nosebleeds, and I would have bad dreams that she was being driven away in a car or on a bus and she couldn't talk to her. And just I had anxiety dreams in my teen years because I had a couple of friends who were going through some hard times, and they confided it in me, and I didn't know what to do with the information. Like that kind of stuff happened when I was like, if someone told me something or they were stressed, it would cause me to, have a stressful dream. Whether, and I can't remember all of them, but there was a one friend in particular where I had a dream that I think I was at a bus stop, and she was on the bus and I couldn't get on, and it drove away, and a car drove by and shot me in the leg or something weird like that, and it startled me and caused me, to wake up. So it's sad that I only remember scary dreams, but I think it's because I'm a deep sleeper and I would never get up and write them out. I just wouldn't be able to wake up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I get that. That's I'm terrible at trying to write, and that's why since we've had recording devices, it's way easier for me.
Yeah.
And I still lose so much between getting out of bed and doing that, though. It's amazing how fast they will just slip away.
Yeah.
But you're talking about things that interest me a lot is the prophetic dreams.
Yes.
So you do have these.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Give us some examples to play with.
Usually, if I have a dream, it has a different feel to it, and I can't really explain it. It's like it's crystal clear. And I don't forget any of it. And it's very crystal clear, and it's there's symbols in it, and it usually the person in the dream won't be hazy, or like sometimes you'll have dreams and the figures aren't so clear and you don't know who they are. Those are never prophetic dreams. Those are like, I'm sorting something out. But if the person's really crystal clear and everyone's identified and I know exactly who it is, I know I'm like, hey, about 3 days something's going to show up. I'm going to give it about 3 days, maybe a little bit more. And I did have, concerning a relationship one time, that I had a dream that, I don't want to say any names. It was quite a while ago. And I was coming into a theater, and this person that I had a relationship with that was really special to me, he was standing on the stage in the theater. And he was standing in front of the audience, and it was like a red velvet, kind of curtain, really fancy theater. And we were not, really fancy, people. We don't get dressed to the hilt or anything remotely like that. But it was like we were at the opera or at the, a theater in Drury Lane in London that was all, done up. And he was standing there, and the whole audience was applauding, and the lights were all on him, and he was getting all the attention. And I was like, I'm coming from behind, like from behind the scenes, like from the backstage, and his hand is behind his back, and so the audience can't see what's in his hand. And I'm looking at what's in his hand, and it's a bottle of alcohol, and I was like, oh. And of course, I mean, I'm not going to go into the details, but I knew right away. I was like, hey, I'm going to see something pretty soon about this person that he hides from other people. He's got one personality
Oh,
and
yes.
another one, and I'm like, what's
Yes.
going to happen? And I now have to update that this person has, he's well now. So it's a happy ending story. He's gotten a lot better, but it was just like a journey between us, and I think that journey probably helped him get better. So, but it was warning me, and I didn't listen, but I knew something was going to happen, but it seemed like things were already well on their pace, on their way. So I just sort of ignored it because I thought, well, there's nothing really much I can do. Everything's, I don't want to start accusing people of anything, but it did come right out into play, and it was a dream that was distinctly warning me about what this person was going to do. But because it speaks in symbols, some people have troubles, like either translating it, deciphering it, or knowing what to do about it, or even believing it in the first place. It's not logical. It's not a logical form of communication to a lot of people.
Right.
But I knew right away that I was like, uh-oh, and the dream had me quite alarmed. Now, I mean, sometimes it can be an expression of my own anxiety about the situation, not necessarily, and it's warning me that this is mine. But I knew that dream right away was not just my anxiety; that this was something that was going to play out, and I was going to be revealed something about this person's issues.
That set of symbols is incredible too. It couldn't be more like tarot like. Here, I mean, that set of symbols, the hand behind the back, the curtain, all of this is perfectly like cut out is a good example. I'm glad it had a good ending.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we're all works in progress, and you try not to judge people. I mean, we're all trying to do our best, and some people, they're doing their best they can at every time. And so it's definitely a better story. But at the time it was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time it was like, uh-oh, but you don't want to see people go down a bad path. But then at the same time, sometimes you can't stop. They have to do what they have to do.
Yep. A lot of the times I find we just observe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we can do often. And it seems like if you meddle in any way by being helpful, trying to relate these symbols to people, it sometimes, I don't know, it creates new pathways and not always good. Do you what about, so in the prophetic dreams, have you had any that kind of like, have you had any that you knew someone was dying or died, or was death stuff?
I've had dreams about animals that have recently died and right away and come back, but I haven't had, when my grandfather died, I didn't have nothing happened. Nothing. I wasn't very close. So I think there has to be a connection there for me to have, like, it has to really be like it meant for me. So my grandfather was really ill. I didn't have a real good big connection with him, and he lived far away. And so I mean, when the phone rang in the morning, I knew they were going to tell me he was gone, but I didn't have any dreams or anything like that about him. Though a relative that passed away recently, I was sleeping and I felt like something was standing in the doorway of my room.
Ooh.
Yes, yeah, and it wasn't a dream. I woke up. I thought it was a dream at first, but when I woke up and I was sitting there, and I wasn't sleep paralysis, I was wide awake, I was sitting there, I was able to move, and I could still feel something standing there, and I just told it, whether or not it was my imagination or that person, I just said, you know what, it's time to move on. Don't stand and stare at me while I'm sleeping. I was like, because
and did it?
Yep, right away it just kind of went. It just felt lighter right away. This person suffered from mental illness and ill health, and it wasn't a very pleasant death at the end of their life. So it did feel a little bit heavy, and I was like, "Yep, you know what? You can move on.
Yes,
okay.
You're free now.
Yeah, don't stand in my
Do not linger. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you, in general, when you're dreaming, what does your dreamscape look like? Like color, black and white, sound, tactile?
Definitely color, and it can be vivid color, like in the sense of that prophetic dream. And I think it depends on the dream. as well. I mean, like the prophetic dream, it wasn't nightmarish. It wasn't a nightmare like I'm terrified. And so I mean, it wasn't like that at all. It was just a very lavish, um, um, like colorful, bright, and lush, you know, curtains. But everybody else was, you know, kind of being wowed by that, when I focused in on the small little detail of the thing in his hand behind his back. And that wasn't as, you know, that was like a dingy old bottle. So I think it depends on the kind of dream. If I have, oh gosh, yeah, out of like two dreams just popped in my head. There's like if I have I had actually an extremely prophetic dream when I was married. And it was like the total opposite. It was extremely prophetic, but it was an absolute nightmare, and a situation way worse than the one I told you about the relationship. The one I told you about the relationship was just, you know, was showing me something that this person was going to have to work on. But when I was married, I would have dreams that were more like a horror movie, and it was like really dark. So I think it depends on the landscape of what you're dealing with at the time, in your waking life, or you know, there's some relevancy, or there's a message. So if there's different textures or things are shown up differently, there must be some sort of communicative message even behind textures and colors and what it looks like. But I don't have necessarily like a theme. I think it changes, you know, depending on what's happening in my sort of waking landscape or the situation that I'm dealing with.
I like that you really are bringing in the deep symbolic stuff here, because I also think that everything in there is, there's a meaning behind everything. And
Mhm.
if you're at all aware of it, then there is a meaning there within the symbol, which we then translate. So the colors, the tactile stuff, the
Mhm.
way it feels, the scent,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's very good. You're the first person who's actually really brought this kind of depth to these symbols, which is nice.
I'm all a very, like, if you're gonna go Freud or Jung, I'm very Jungian, because like
Oh yeah.
for Freud, just I think Freud was projecting a lot of his issues out on the dreamscape. Now, I don't think he was totally wrong about everything, but I think he was missing a really big picture, and he was sort of projecting his own anxieties on people. So, you know, to sort of not see things in symbolism and archetypes, and you know, disconnect the higher self from it and all that stuff, and just see everybody as neurotic little children. I was like, wow, it didn't really connect for me. So when you're dealing with Jung and archetypes, symbolism and a collective consciousness, we're not just dreaming about our stuff, we're getting symbols from a whole collective, right? It's just made more
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. I'm definitely in the Jungian camp. So on that note, actually, speaking about mythos,
Wait,
which
wait,
you
wait,
know,
wait. Are you going to go and leave symbols without talking about chaos magic and sigils?
you can go there. I was just going to get into
All right.
that. You go there, Jer.
No, it's okay.
I think you just addressed it, so
I did.
bring it on in.
What do you see as I mean, obviously there's correlations there, but do you think of that symbolism as far as input only to you, or do you try and input to the system as well?
I think I probably input to the system with not even intending to do it. I think it probably just happens automatically as an exchange when you're dreaming. I don't, because I don't consciously say I'm going to do it, but I think every time you meditate, I think every time you think about what you want, a law of attraction, I think you're putting stuff out and you're adding things to the collective. I think it's unavoidable. I just don't think you can't not do it.
Seeding the cloud.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I
But
mean,
there's a difference there in in being passive with it,
yeah,
and also then activating and exerting some will
there
too.
is. I mean, if you're actually intentionally, wakefully doing it and creating symbols, then I mean, I suppose that you could draw from a collective and then add your own intuitions to it as well. We are actually, funny enough, we're doing a rebrand on drawing out the spirits, and we've been reading a book on the chaos protocols, I believe. Yeah, halfway
It's
there. And so
Gordon
we're
White's book.
Yeah, we've
exactly.
had him on.
Um, So we're working on a sigil for that's why there's like gaps on our website now, because we're working on doing a sigil as a logo as opposed to what we had before, because we're sort of getting our niche in there.
Not my
And
niche.
figuring out
Get your own niche.
our niche, John and I, we're figuring
Yes.
out, like, we sort of narrowed down what the look and how we wanted it. And we're reading this book and we decided we wanted something different. And so I did a whole website redesign, and we're working on a
Which is very nice, by the way.
digital. Thank you.
And I admire that you're actually imploring this tool, because that's what it is. It's a powerful tool in the chest, and it should be implored.
Have a look at Ryan Peverly's when you get a chance, or the Culture podcast.
Okay. I will see.
What do you think, Melissa? So on archetypes, which is still tying into all of this, it's still, they kind of tie together, I think, the Jungian stuff with chaos. And so when we're so archetypes are really, we're talking about the language of myth, and then, it transcends cultures and all that. And there are just some things they're just threads that are through it all. When you experience these kinds of things in the dreamscape, how do you parse out your personal, and we're going below your personal daily chatter that you get rid of.
Yeah.
When you're going into deeper levels, how do you parse out what's your personal stuff that may deal with, and even below like the persona ego level, and you get down deeper into like the quadrant of your personality, and then the collective, the big archetypes, which, a lot of times play out as like the water. This is why I always like to ask about nature and where one grows up. How do you parse out the difference to get the meaning of the dream? And in particular, since the dreams that stick out are the intense dreams. So
yeah. Well, I've never actually really thought about the difference between the archetypes, the personal. I think it's important not to get those confused as well, because you are not the archetype. I mean, the archetype could be speaking to an element of you, but you're not the archetype, right? So I think it's definitely important to realize that. I think it has to have like a big picture message in it. It's not just, oh, I'm sorting out some information, or this person's going to do something. After when I had my son, I was terrified that he was going to drown in my mother's pool in back.
Oh.
And so I would have nightmares and dreams, and there was water, and I could have taken it very like just, oh, my son's going to drown. Could have been raging water. It could have been dead, calm water, but there was always water, and I had an anxiety about it. And there was a personal message, but I think there was a bigger message of like emotions and reflecting the world. So I think it was playing on, if I was like with my son, like there was one dream where it was a calm, dead water, and I was in a boat house where we had a boat docked, and I came walking down the ramp, and his body was floating in the water, and I'm screaming and I'm pulling him out, and I'm trying to revive him, and he won't revive, and he's like maybe 2, and I can't, and he's gone, and it was like dead calm water. And it's like there's a personal message to it, but then there's like this archetype there that's like speaking to, like, this isn't about you, this isn't about your son, there's something about the water, and there's a bigger message in that could be reflecting things that are, this dream might not just be about you, it could be about a state that's happening in the world too. So I mean, I'm not saying that necessarily that's how it goes, but I think you have to analyze your dream in different levels too, possibly. Like, okay, is this dream about me? Because my son, by that time, I was teaching him how to swim. Like, that's how I approached the problem, was, okay, instead of avoiding it, we're doing swimming lessons like crazy. But was this really about that I thought my son was going to drown, or was there a bigger thing happening with everyone at that time? So I think it's, now I didn't analyze it that way, but you could analyze it like, okay, is it about me, or what else is going on in the world? Like, is other people having these dreams, or is there something happening politically? Is there, I don't know what's happening with the planets. I guess you could sort of go outwards from yourself and think of if it's a collective or not. I actually don't, like I said, like, you get so caught up in your own mind and your life and your stuff. I don't tend to do that lately. But I think that's how I would approach it, is maybe just look at, okay, is it about me, or is there other things? Like, just analyze what's happening with the whole entire planet, as opposed to, and I think sometimes that can happen where you have a dream and you think it's about you, and then you realize, like, you can realize other people are having similar dreams all like around the world. So I don't know how you would find that information out, but I've heard of stuff like that, where people are having similar dreams, and then some big world event happens or something massive happens in the globe. I don't know if I've ever actually experienced something that epic.
A lot of people had plane crash dreams before 9/11. An inordinate amount.
Yeah.
One of the dreams I have is to get a database going, free, open source, of course, where we allow people through Nox Mente, somehow, where we allow people to enter their dreams, and where it's its own searchable database. So there is one of these out there, but it's for one guy's dream who's an amazing, he like 50,000 dreams, but it's all his own dreams. So it's a database that's searchable. And it almost like Cliff High's bots, where it picks up sub themes and subtext and overlapping stuff to get a feel on the collective for those things. Like there's this many people dreamed of plane crashes, and then and then that pops forward as something to look at, and then of course if that happens, and we have that. The only downside to that is it's honor system, so there are trolls.
Yes.
That would just come in and enter bogus stuff. But that's literally one of my dreams, is to have some sort of user interface where anyone can enter dreams.
Well, Dean Radin had some sort of, and it wasn't about people necessarily writing dreams, but he was doing some sort of test to see if, and I don't know exactly what it was, but it was about the chance versus they had some sort of meter, and it would do things randomly, and they were measuring to see if the randomness changed closer to major world events, and I think it did. I think it was showing less randomness in its choices when major world events happened, and I can't explain the exact test that they did or research, because I don't have it in front of me.
I have it.
But it was pretty elaborate. Do you? Oh,
I do.
Wow.
It's
fascinating.
They conducted an experiment with the global, a random number generator, which they tried to influence with group meditation.
Right.
And they did.
This stuff is so fascinating.
This has also been tested. I forget when it was, but it was called the Maharishi effect, or dubbed Maharishi effect. Yeah. It's you can call it a placebo. I mean, it's praying. Yeah. Call it whatever you want. It's it's proof that we influence reality.
Yeah.
But there's nothing out there that's collating dreams that I know of that's searchable. So I can go in, and even if I don't enter a dream, I can search dragon, and then I can pull up all the dreams that have dragon in them, right? And look at the date timestamps, and then see if there's a hit overlapping something that I had, so that maybe there is, so we get a deeper understanding of the symbols, but maybe there's some sort of communication that comes back to us personally. I mean, the field's wide open for possibility.
It would be fascinating to see if you're having these dreams and other people all over the world are having these dreams, and there might be some force that's trying to communicate with everybody.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's probably ourselves.
Nish, in the end.
Sorry, if you remember those 12 months ago when we started this, I was building that database, and you're like, no, I want to do a podcast. Remember?
Yes, but I said I want that too. I wanted us to do this, Jerry, and I wanted that to happen too. So I think let's do it.
I'm telling you, it's already written. I already wrote it, because that's what I thought you wanted me to do.
Dude, let's unroll it soon. Let's get that going.
That would be amazing.
Whoa, Melissa, you're here, right here. It's like generating. We needed this chat.
That would be an amazing project. I mean, it would be fascinating. The only thing, like you said, is trolls.
You have to sign up. You have to sign up.
Yeah.
You have to have a valid email address, which anyone can get. But what's a troll going to do other than put in bullshit dreams?
Yeah.
I know, but that could muddy the waters. We'll talk about all this later, but I'm so thrilled. So thrilled. This is exactly, somehow, Melissa, you were like the springboard for this right now. It's so awesome. I want to get in. So you were kind of addressing something. This is I've been trying to parse out bigger symbols, and so you were just talking about them. I was going to do this a little bit later, but water. So I want to hear about your relationship with water in the dreamscape, and if what kind of, although the sun one is crazy, that dream I'm still reeling on, by the way. So I would have been upset. It's kind of
I
upsetting hearing
was.
it.
No,
Yeah.
I was very, very, very upset. Trust me, I woke up with sick to my stomach for the whole day, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't let him go anywhere.
Yeah. It's interesting though. You were teaching him to swim at that time though.
At 6 months, my parents had a pool, and they wouldn't get a fence around it, and I was always paranoid. So they were doing baby lessons. So as soon as he was 6 months, I was like, okay, I'm not running away from this fear. We are teaching him to swim, and he did swim lessons from like 6 months till he was like 10.
Okay, so the dream was before that, actually.
Um, I had dreams before it, and I had dreams after, even while I was doing swim
Oh,
lessons. So
wow.
it continued because he would go spend the night at my mother and my stepfather's house, and I would phone at like 11 o'clock at night. He hasn't gotten up to use the bathroom and gone out the back bathroom door down to the pool, has he? And she'd be like, "Stop it, Melissa, stop!" And I'd be like,
Oh, I
"I'm
would
just
be the
making
same way.
sure."
Yeah.
I'm making sure that you have it all locked because you're absent-minded and you don't have any security around your pool. It's just open, and that's how little kids die.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's
And
just logical.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I did. I had them all along, and they just I think they faded away as I realized he was a really confident and good swimmer.
And that's a gift too. I think it's important to learn swimming anyway. You never know. Plus,
Mhm.
it can be fun. In your life though, dreams, and particularly looking for the dreams that might have like the water monsters and stuff in them.
I didn't it was never I've never had a dream with a monster. It's just the water is overwhelming, or it's like high giant waves, it's going to consume everything, or like I'm on a cruise ship that's sinking and I'm at the bow and I can see the water's just coming over. It's just, and it's natural, it's the raw power of water, and it's
Hmm.
engulfing everything. It's not a monster per se, it's just I don't it's just the
The raw
raw
power.
power
Yeah.
of that, and I don't know, I always saw water as linked to emotions
Yeah.
and being overwhelmed, so whenever I'm having those dreams, I'm overwhelmed by something
Yeah. Yeah.
emotional.
I think of it too as definitely emotional content. I mean, that's classic. And it is an archetype. Water,
Yes.
especially the big waters,
Yes.
a major archetype in the dream. So like one could even say I'm encountering the spirit of water. Like Jung kind of talks about that angle in his in the red book, alludes to all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The spirit of the elements.
Yeah.
So okay, so in these, so that's water. What about fire?
You know, I'm an Aries, and
Thank you.
fire
I
is
was
my
going to ask
sign.
that. That was one of our questions.
I've never had dreams about fire. I've never had terrifying dreams about fire.
And
I cannot, no house is on fire, no things burning. I've never been afraid of fire. That's that way.
interesting.
Yeah, no,
Nice.
it's never played out in my dreams. Water has, but fire has never, not in a nightmare. I'm like, if anything, maybe it's been there as like a backdrop or a campfire or a glow, but no, nothing that's gonna like burn. I've never had dreams of burning or anything like that that I can recall, that I can consciously recall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be the crazy. It doesn't have to be crazy
Mhm.
campfire. What about like big air? Gusts in the trees, stuff like that.
Oh, that's good. Now, when I was young, I lived in Calgary for a while, Alberta, prairie provinces, and I used to have dreams about tornadoes
Ooh.
because tornadoes were touching down one year. It was a really bad year, and I used to have nightmares about tornadoes. And I don't know if it has to do with the tornado or is it a message about me, but I was terrified of tornadoes for an entire summer, and had nightmares about them all the time. When I might have been around 9 or 10. Yeah.
Do you have any standout images, like actual dream images, besides
No,
the
I
just the
can't remember.
overarching? Yeah.
Just the overarching. I don't have a specific dream. I just know that I was having trouble sleeping. If there was a storm, God help, I would be up all night. And it was illogical. I would phone. In those days, you didn't have the internet. You had phone, and I would be phoning the weather network, checking the weather all the time. I was really quite terrified and obsessed about this. And on a bigger scale, it could have been a projection of things that were out of control in my life. You're sort of just projecting it on this weather. But yeah, tornadoes was the thing, and I was literally for one entire summer terrified of them, and it just went away. I might have resolved whatever it was, and it just was like, oh, why was I scared of tornadoes for 2.5 months?
I love that though. Yeah, and it's big air. That's the spirit of it, and it's in its destructive form too.
It's fine. Yeah.
You know, a lot of people call tornadoes the finger of God. You know, it's got all that kind of. Yeah, I grew up in. I mean, I was kind of split between Georgia and Iowa, but Iowa we would get tornadoes, and that's where I heard, like, I was little, the finger of God was like a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, they scared me too, but I was so scared I'd want to go out and watch.
I'm pretty sure I saw a toy on the Adam and Eve catalog called that the finger of God.
Classic. I'll never think of it the same way.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay, and then so what about like forest? So let's round this out to earth, right? So forest and the big wood and all that, or even just prairies, earth where the symbol sticks out.
Earth. I mean, even besides that nightmare in the woods, I've never had it. That's never played in my dreams either.
Yeah, because I mean, it's kind of just there, though. I mean, that's the thing.
It's and if it is, it's very calming.
Yeah,
and grounding and recharging. I've always seen, like, that's why I will go for a walk in the woods in the morning. Is I'm trying to, I'm like, something's on my mind, and I'm in there, and it's whatever the energy is in the woods is going to help me sort it out.
Yeah, I love that. It's that says a lot about you. Mm-hmm. So, all right, what about reoccurring dreams?
When I was married, I had it's probably the worst dreams that would reoccur. And I was with my son's dad for 14 years, and I would have reoccurring dreams, two different ones. I had one where I was in the back seat of a truck, and my now ex was in the front with his friends, and he would turn around and grab a nail gun and shoot me in the head and kill me.
Oh my God.
We're divorced.
Jeez.
We're divorced now.
Yeah, I guess that says it all.
He's not a bad person, by the way. That would be unfair.
This is dream. It's dream content.
Dream content. So he's not he's not a violent bad man. So I want to be clear about that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
He's a good father, and he's a good person. Just want to be clear about that. And then there was another dream that I always had a dream that someone was breaking into my house and going to kill me. And one night I was having that dream, and they were breaking into. It was always a shadowy figure, and it was coming into my house, and I would have this over and over and over again. And I was convinced that someone was going to break into my house. And one night I was having the dream, and I was waking up, and there was a shadowy figure in the doorway, and I thought, oh, here it's happened. And I jumped out of bed, screamed, and I hit it. And I heard this scream. It was just my husband coming to bed. I scared him so bad. Oh. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And I had to calm down and explain to him that I was having a nightmare, and I thought someone broke into the house. And I had this reoccurring dream multiple times for months. And then it went away. And then about a few months later, my now ex-husband, he had hired this guy to come and do carpentry work, and he was working for him. The guy needed extra money, and I didn't like the guy, and I said, "Hey, I don't want this guy coming in. There's something wrong." It's a whole list of really awful things that happened that I was just like, "Look, this guy is giving signs. I don't want him in the house. And long story short, eventually my now ex finally said, you know what, I don't want you coming around the house. We don't need any more work done. But it was too late. So my ex went to go hunting. So he meant he was gone for 2 weeks. But when he did that, he bragged to everybody that he was going hunting because he's rather loud and everybody has to know what he's doing. So everybody knew he wasn't going to be home. And so one night, it was like 3, Hayden was my son, sorry, I shouldn't say his name, but he was about 3.5 and I was sleeping. It was 3 in the morning. That day earlier, that worker had come by and said, oh, you know, my ex, he was going to pay me. I said, well, sorry, you'll have to get it when he comes back or something. And I shut the door in his face, like, go away. You're not, you know, there's no work for you. And so we went to bed that night. And 3:30 in the morning, I sat straight out of bed and I was like, just right straight out of a deep sleep. I just sat straight up and I was like, somebody's outside the house. I just knew it right away. There was no sounds, there was no nothing. And I was walking around my house and I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, you're just being paranoid. You're just being delirious. You're always having these, you know, break into your house dreams. Just chill out. There's nobody there. You know, I'm checking all the parameters and looking outside. So I'm going back to my room and all of a sudden I hear it. Bang, bang, bang on the front door. Bang, bang, bang. And I'm not sleeping and I realize it's real. And I look out to the door and I can see that guy and he's got a pick in his hand, he's got a hammer and he's trying to whack the door down, the door handle in. And he was high on crack and cocaine or something because he could have just smashed the window and gone in. It's so dumb. But I started yelling. I got really, really aggressive and I'm like, and as soon as he heard me, he knew I was awake and I'm yelling, what, like, I'm not going to repeat what I was yelling. But he started pretending that he was hurt. And it was the worst. Like I'm looking and he started dragging his hand like down the glass because he was on drugs. And so he's staggering and dragging. He's going, help me, let me in, I'm hurt, please. He just went from like trying to break in like a crazy person to pretending he was hurt, trying to get me to open the door. And I'm sitting there with a baseball bat and I'm on the phone and I'm calling the cops and he's like, and then as soon as I'm calling the cops and I told him, get off my doorstep. And he just goes right back in with the hammer and starts bashing the door handle in again. And I'm calling the cops and I told him, I said, if you get in here, I'm going to bash your brains on the steps. I'm going to kill you. I was like, because if you get in here and you get me, that, like my son's in the bedroom, like who knows? He was probably going to rob, rape, kill, who knows? He's a drug addict. And, you know, my ex-husband wasn't very clever. He didn't have, you know, there's a lot of reasons why we're divorced. And so it came true. I was having these dreams for months about someone breaking in and it happened. And so I'm like, and it repeated and it repeated. It was like something was telling me and no, it's going to happen. And I wasn't having, the funny thing is I wasn't having the bad dream that night. I just woke up from a deep sleep straight up. And I knew somebody, I could almost smell. It's almost like you can smell them, but you can't smell them, but you can just sense them. Like your spidey senses are tingling. Like something's different. Someone's around my house. I can feel them. And
that is incredible. Incredible. It's not only is it reoccurring, it's prophetic and scary.
It was like a horror movie. And when I don't think everybody understood how terrifying of a situation it was. My son certainly didn't because he slept through the whole entire thing. But when I tried to tell people like how I couldn't sleep, I couldn't stay home for weeks, I couldn't have a shower, I had to go to the gym to have a shower. Yeah. I couldn't shower by myself because I was so paranoid. Like it just traumatized me. I'm fine. Obviously, after a couple of weeks, I was fine. Everyone's like, you're tough. You can take them out. I'm like, that's not the point. I'm like,
no, that messes with your sense of security. Yeah,
exactly.
I find it interesting it happened at 3:30 too, which is that, you know, all too familiar witching hour. What kind of religious upbringing did you have, if any?
I think my family was probably like Anglican, but non-practicing religious. So, my mom did tarot cards, stuff like that. So she probably has some alternative views. So I was exposed to that, and but nothing rigid. There was no religious structure in my life. There was no like, let's do a ritual, let's do this. So there was no. It's mostly science for me when I was younger. Right.
I don't think that. I think that that's just something that happens. I don't think it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's like the best time they can get through, maybe, you know, they'll do it at 3:30.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with
Yeah.
Jesus.
Or it just happened to be the time that guy ran out of money for drugs and he needed some.
Yeah, but think of all the
Yeah.
things that happened that led up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And for you to be tapping into it at a deep unconscious level, like, you know, remote viewing essentially through your
Mhm.
dream.
Yeah. It's
It's
insane. And the thing is once I divorced, a lot of these horrible dreams, yeah, I would have them again even after that scene. They went away. They went
yeah,
away.
I was going to ask about that, especially like, you know, you were having these, clearly it wasn't a happy relationship with
No.
like the truck dream and all
No.
that. And so they did end after the divorce.
They did. They just went away. I mean, he wasn't pleasant. It wasn't the pleasant first couple of years, but they literally, I didn't have to live with the situation that I was unhappy about. And
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that my ex-husband was standing there with a gun threatening me or a violent person.
No, it just means you're
No.
incompatible. That
It's incompatible and it
Yeah.
wasn't working.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a sensitive person energetically too, and he could have been projecting a whole lot of shit at you.
Well, yeah, and for him, everything was always about him, and his personality can be overwhelming. He's a very overbearing, overwhelming. Everything was always about him. And
Were you married to
if you
David
made
Wilcock?
no,
Okay.
no, I was married
Jeez.
to. Yeah, no, not yeah. Everything is about him, so it would just have to be. If you tried to take the spotlight, he would get jealous, even though everything was always about him. It's like, well, can I have some attention at some point in life?
Was he a
No.
Leo? Is he a Leo?
Aquarius.
Oh, he's got to have like Leo rising. Do you know his chart?
Mm-mm.
Like
I don't. I
that
don't know.
me stuff is so Leo.
Oh my! I'm not going to say it. They'll probably listen to this. I have an uncle who's a Leo. So
I have Leo. I have Gemini rising, Leo moon.
Uncle
So I mean,
Leo.
yeah. I mean, but it can go negative and it can be great too. So
yeah,
it's not.
exactly.
That's wow. What? That's some juicy content, Melissa. Jeez.
I know. I was like, I didn't remember this when you called, but I'm like, I'm sure it will all come back. Ding, yes, it does. But
Oh yeah.
I don't have like I've had a few dreams, but like I said, they show up intensely when it's saying, hey, something's gonna happen.
Do you in the dreamscape? Do you I'm thinking about others. So other dreamers in essence. Do you encounter others that are not, that you in the dreamscape feel are not you? So other people dreaming or entities, whatever, that are actually not your content.
I've never had a shared dream with someone else that I'm aware of. I think I've like that one dream I said about the person that was on the stage. I really believe like that it was so clearly and crisply him. It wasn't blurred, it wasn't distorted, it wasn't like he changed into somebody else. Like, you know how sometimes you have a dream and the person starts out as one person and then they change into something else and
Yes.
they don't stay the same. He was clearly and solidly him. And it stayed that way throughout the entire dream. So I really, if it wasn't him, it was like, it was, the universe was trying to say, no, this is solidly about this individual and what he's going to do. It's not a projection. It's not your own fear. It's not, when it's more hazy, I kind of get the sense that it's me more than the person, I think is what I mean. But I don't ever recall sharing a dream with somebody.
Well, and it doesn't have to be someone that is alive. It could be, it could be a spirit. It could be whatever you want to call other sentient beings in the dreamscape. I mean, it could be an alien. I mean, there's just so many ways you could wrap that.
An alien?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall it and I can't recall any sort of being. Maybe my higher self, but that's me then again.
Yeah, that is you. But that, especially in like Jungian terms, presents itself as other.
Yes.
That, and it can present itself as like the quaternity of your personality. So your sensate function, your feeling, and they get different personalities or personas and you interact with them. What about, so let's talk about lucidity. And so I put a lot of presence under the lucidity tree. So under the lucidity tree is all this other language like astral projection, out of body. I just think it's states of lucidity, but so all that stuff, I don't know how you package it, but are you awake in dreams? Do you have it where you're like, I'm dreaming? I know I'm dreaming, and
Yes. Yeah, there's some times where I don't, and there's some times where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm dreaming. I mean, I can't recall specific dreams, but I can recall remembering thinking, oh, I'm in a dream.
and what is that like when you have that realization, just in like that feeling?
I think it's more like you're not. It's actually kind of freeing because you're like, I can just let it go and happen and not tense up, and or even if anything happens, I can just. It makes it actually a little more at ease. You're not taking it as literal. You might not
Yeah.
be reacting as physically intense to it. Whereas if you think it's real, your heart rate might rise more, or you might be less relaxed.
Do you get, so in the dreamscape, do you have experiences like flying and stuff like that?
When I was younger, not so much anymore. There was a dream, like I said, when I was married, that I was trying to fly, and they were all pulling me back down, and I kicked and struggled free to fly. And I've also had dreams where I'm just up in the universe, and I just literally lie back, and it feels like I'm not me anymore, and I just disperse, and I'm the universe. But yeah, I've lied back, and I'm floating in it. I don't know if that makes any sense. It was a really
Yeah.
short, fleeting dream, and it was like ecstatic because I'm floating. It's like you're in water, but you're not in water, and you're just laying there free, floating around, and you're sort of not like it's like you don't have a body anymore. I've had dreams like that, but flying adventurous dreams, I would more when I was younger.
Those, I love those.
Yeah.
So in all this kind of general dream stuff, what do you think it all is? So as far as separate from this waking life you're having, what do you think
That's
dreaming
so.
is?
I think it can be a several things. Like I do think there's a component where we are sorting stuff that we've absorbed from our waking life, our brains sort of absorbing it. But I also think there is it's like a recharge, and we're recommunicating and getting, re-affiliated and directed, and we're absorbing things that we're not necessarily aware of. Like it's like we're being like a lot of those dreams, if I hadn't gone to sleep and dreamt of those things, I would have ignored things completely. I would have never left the marriage. I would have never, been aware of how this person was going to behave. And like
Mm-hmm.
for the theater, like I think they have a really intense communicative between you and whatever the creative source is. It's definitely a way that it's communicating things with you. Um, and also a way that you're sorting things, filing things, and sorting things out in your mind, probably to remain sane.
Well, clearly, like right, in the sorting and in the analysis type stuff, but you bring in a lot of really great examples where stuff that is actually external that will play out with your prophetic stuff.
Mhm.
That that is a step beyond. So there's definitely more going on than just your psychological content and the daily
Yeah.
shuffling of stuff.
Yes.
There's definitely a deeper well there, and I think for someone like you who brings all this to the table, I just wonder, like, so I guess maybe let's ask this in the reverse. What do you think this state is, this waking
The
state?
waking state. Oh,
Yeah.
I think. Well, if I go by, I mean, it's definitely I can't say it's a harder state. It might feel a little heavier, more denser because of the body. And I think it's just a more dense version of dreaming. I mean, when dreaming, you can manifest things really quickly. If you're conscious, like things can show up. And I think for here, I'm not entirely sure that it seems like material, it's solid, and we're collecting data and we're learning different things. I'm not always sure what the purpose of it is, but I have a feeling that dreaming is linked to it. Like it's like, okay, we're collecting the data, we're learning stuff here, and the dreaming process is taking it, shuffling it, and sorting it. But then there's that other element that's warning you and communicating with you about things that maybe you're missing, and to help you navigate through this realm. And I'm not sure if I buy, like, there's that theory where it's like, oh, this is a school and we're here to learn it. I'm not so sure if it has that point or not, or we're just here and we've got a job to do for a higher energy. Like, I don't know.
No.
Are we in the cell of something? Are we like in the cell of a body, or is there some kind of spiritual thing? Are we here to collect data? I'm not 100% about it.
If we had jobs to do and we don't know, that's fucked up. So I say no way to that.
Why is that fucked up? That we could be like these energies and we're here to collect data and we have things that we're doing here we're bringing stuff back.
Okay, so we're in this place, whatever it is, right? This realm where we're ruled by a possibly fraudulent system, right? With all this hidden stuff that we don't understand. It's like just another layer of the whole as above, so below thing, because what I see when I hear those kind of stories is this enormous hierarchy that's been built in the upper planes or lower plane, whatever that is, right? That, they've got plans for, it's more control to me. That's how I see it. I see it all as just more.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't see it as a hierarchy. I just see it as we're like learning stuff for ourselves and we're bringing it back and we're kind of storing it somewhere.
I meant the hierarchy in terms of 3D, 4D, 5D, wherever these other beings, entities exist. That hierarchy.
So you mean in different dimensions?
Yes. If we are okay, so look at the higher self, right? That's allegedly our other half, or whatever you want to call it, twin flame. That's in a higher dimension, right? So we're beholden to this thing that we cannot control. It controls us. And
but what if it is us? we're just down here navigating things. Like
I haven't made that. I totally get that, right? But what is said by people a lot today is that it's different, it's separate, it's part of you that doesn't fit in your body, it's part of you that can't be here, but it gives you guidance. It's like, it's your higher self. I mean, it's what everybody says that is. And I just don't like that whole idea of having these, even the whole idea of the notion of soul groups and soul contracts. Come on.
I've never had that experience as soul groups and soul contracts. I've never ever had an experience where I've had a contract with anyone.
Neither have I. No,
I don't think there is a contract.
I don't think you know what I'm talking about. There are a lot of people out there who I would call them New Agers for the most part.
No, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, right. So they say, you have, your life's fucked up and you smoke crack because you have a soul contract to do that.
I don't buy it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that's a lot of.
I think you've got fucked up and smoked crack because you just sort of got off on a wrong path.
Yeah, it's a lot of escapism.
You can solve it, but it's going to be hard.
So, and that's what I meant.
Because it takes the responsibility away from your actions.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but and I wasn't referring that there's this hierarchy, but I just like we're collecting data for a collective consciousness and we're storing it there and it's bigger than us, and it's like that's why we get messages from it, because it's got a wisdom that we don't have.
Yeah, I think that Nish and I pretty much look at that as the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
And we're expressions of that, individuated.
And I know what you mean by soul contracts and stuff like that. That just sounds too like
woo.
It's like, okay. Not that's just woo. It just sounds very like I don't know the word for it. It just sounds like, oh, is this like illegal? Is there a lawyer there, or what's going on? Like it just, I don't know.
I don't think they're that binding because you can get out of them pretty easily. The interesting thing I found out, I discovered, I suppose you would say, about these soul contracts is the ease with which they can be undone verbally or with a sigil even, makes me think that it's not really there, but you're assigning some function of your mental or your psyche to it. Like I smoke crack because of the soul contract. So I'm going to say this prayer 10 times a day, this mantra, whatever, to get rid of that soul contract, to break it. So maybe it's just a
No,
mental programming trick.
maybe. I
Under
mean,
the Mm,
we do a lot of conversation about Aleister Crowley and Philema in
mhm.
our show, and you know how people misinterpret the whole notion of do what thou wilt.
Right.
And
Yes.
so
People
maybe people
misinterpret the whole. Yeah.
they don't have a contract, they just have a will. They just have something that they're meant to do that will fulfill them and their joy. I don't know. And
I know. I'm
yeah.
trying to take devil's advocate on the whole. Oh, you're on the right path, or you're not on the right path because this has been set up for you to do, and you have no idea. But
Well, I mean, I guess there could be multiple paths to the same place. I mean,
And
like
the
why?
shadow, our personal shadows, and this is separate from collective shadows, because that's another topic. But our own stuff that seems to sabotage us. So the crack smoker, for example,
Yeah.
that wants to not take responsibility for the action of lighting up, and then moves into all the language about. So this can get tied into so much, but like the new age stuff, sure, the soul contracts, but then that same shadow will take and throw science back at you. Well, it's changed my neural pathways, and I've got a chemical response and an addiction. But also, yes, certainly, I'm not denying that science. I'm just saying at some point one has to ingest the shadow, and that's
Yeah.
where the will, and especially when we start talking like magic, this is when actually the application of will comes in. And as Jerry said earlier with soul contracts, it is shocking how easily they, in the mythos around them, they can be undone. I no longer have contracts with this. That is
do you know how many times
so woo-woo.
Do you know how many times
Yeah.
I've tried to break my contracts with the mosquitoes? It never
It
works.
seems it's very, and you know what? It's very flaky. And I can see why a lot of people are like, nah, to new age stuff, because a lot of it's very flaky and there's not a solid, representation there.
Well, there's a denial of, especially in the new age stuff, sadly, there is there's a lot of the new age stuff ties into all that white light and the happy stuff.
Yeah.
And it really denies a lot of the dark, shadowy stuff, and it pushes it away.
I think that's dangerous
It
too.
is. And that in and of itself just collects more shadow and darkness.
Yes.
Well, but then the industry comes up around that saying, well, we're going to do the shadow work, right? We're going to do the soul retrieval stuff. And and so it all gets mixed up into.
Well, isn't it easier just to admit that humans have bad and good in them, and that divide between evil lies right down between you? It's the goodies aren't out there, the baddies aren't out there. You're capable of doing those things.
According to the Vatican, we're all bad.
It's a circle with a negative sign and a positive sign.
Exactly.
Right?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter if you're left or right or what your politics are. It doesn't matter what your religion is. You're capable of doing bad stuff just because you're human.
Yes.
And you're capable of doing really good things, and you've got some choices.
Actually, on this, Melissa, have you ever had any experience, like when you're learning something, for example, or you're interested in learning something, has that played over into your dreams where you actually got downloads, so to speak, or information pertaining to something you wanted to learn, and it came through in your waking life? You see it a lot in school, like in college, or anytime you're learning something new. Sometimes people will dream about that, but the next level, I think, is when, the best way is example. Like when I wanted to learn belly dancing, I actually started learning it in dreams before I ever took a class. And so when I went in to take a class, I was already doing these drills and these moves. I didn't know what they were called, but I had already done them and mastered them. And so my first teacher was like, why are you in the beginner's class? You're already doing these. I couldn't tell her the names, but I had learned that in dreaming.
Mm-hmm. No, I know what you mean, but I can't recall anything like that. I can't recall pre-learning something in a dream specifically.
Just downloads of information.
I recall
artistic ideas. That's what you should.
Artistic ideas,
There you
absolutely,
go.
100%. I mean, I get a lot of my answers to things, like I'll be stuck
Yeah.
on something technical. Like I'd had to do an interactive PDF one time, and I was like, it was hideous and horrible, and I couldn't figure out how to solve the issue. And I went to bed, and I was due the next morning, and I'd spent so much time, and then the answer came to me in a dream. I had this thing where something had to pop up about somebody who was an activist in this PDF, and I was like, how am I going to make it pop up and look good? How am I going to trigger the button? How am I going to do this? And in the dream, the video that I had popped up, in the dream, an activist stood there with a sign and went, rah, and held the sign up, and the video was on the sign. And then I woke up and I'm like, I'm going to have a silhouette of an activist with a sign. It's going to pop up, and then the video is going to appear, and it's going to look really awesome. Yeah.
That is awesome. That's what I'm talking about. This is why I have a Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry translated.
Yeah, no, creative ideas come all the time. I mean, like a lot of times if I get too stressed out or it's blocked, I'm like, I'm just going to go to bed.
That's seriously an awesome example though of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that happens. I think that happens to a lot of people.
It does for me, but we've talked to people that it doesn't, that there's just no.
Well, I think you have to be creative in the first place too. I think if you're creative and it doesn't happen, I'd be surprised.
And well, I've known that I can do that as long as I've been alive. So it's something I've come to rely on, and it gets stronger too. Because if you really have a problem, like I'm a computer programmer, that's my job, my real job. And sometimes I used to get stuck on problems, and I would go to sleep, and boom, you get the answer in the morning. You'll just have an idea how to do it. And it's not necessarily that I had a dream that showed me. It's next time I think about it, it's there as an idea, ready to go. It's like on deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like we can hone that. And so that's kind of where I want to go next is, what do you think is the potential here? So say if you actually, for people, we focus hard on using the dreamscape as a tool. So, and for example, what we were just talking about, but taking that a step further and kind of blending it or meshing it on top of this waking life. Are you getting an image for that?
Sorry, say that again. What?
Somehow coalescing the dream life, your dream life with your waking life, and using it as a pushing further into it as a tool, like we were just talking about with these kinds of downloads. What do you think the potential is? Do you think we could attain something bigger, like messing with our reality in a real way that is tangible?
Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure how we could, but I think it might have something to do with the fact that people have to I think the more rigid you are about things and the more tense you are, I think it's harder for it to come through in dreams. And I think it helps. I think that's why creative people get those dreams more often, is because they're more open to the fact that it's going to come that way. Whereas somebody else might see something and just discard it. So I think the more open you are, and the more likely you are to have that. And it probably helps to have good solid sleeping patterns too. If you're up working and you think working harder is going to get you the answer, and you're not letting go of that, and you're really rigid, you're going to miss out opportunities for your mind to actually free up and I mean, whether it's information you already have or whether it's information coming from some other source, you can't get it if you're tense and rigid and you don't believe that that's an avenue that you can take.
So I'm curious about, I told you this in the pre-show, the state of death and how it plays into all of this. So how it, like here we are now in waking life, and we're all having our experiences. And then we can kind of bilocate intellectually by thinking about the past and pulling up dreams from the past, and then by locate even further by stepping into the imagery of dreams and recalling them. How or what do you think death is as far as all of the states of consciousness context is concerned?
Well, death would probably be, and I mean, I can't say 100%, obviously nobody can because we haven't experienced it, but
that's why we love this.
Yeah. I think
no one knows.
I think death would just be the end of consciousness in this realm. I don't think it's the end per se. I gather that you actually might be more able to connect to that realm that we do when we dream, at a faster, higher, more accessible rate when when you actually pass from this realm.
Do you think that you lose some of your persona or your ego or the the Melissa?
Yeah, I think you do shed some stuff. That wouldn't surprise me if you did. I can't imagine why when you die, if you actually let go of this earth, why you would take a lot of your traumas and your injuries with you. I mean, maybe you do. I think, like, when people say ghosts and haunting places, I don't think that's really you. I think that's sort of a trauma or pain that's left behind, honestly. I think you would leave that behind, and it might I think that's why ghosts sort of get less reported over time, perhaps. Because like it's the trauma just sort of fades away and diminishes. But I don't think you carry all of it with you. You might have that core with you that's always there, but I don't think you're I think you have to release and let it go. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. It's this is why I like talking about all the stuff that's kind of free range, free game, open, because no one really knows. And the fun is in shedding that whole kind of fact check reality, because that closes in the narrative, and we can really ponder some ideas here talking about consciousness. Have you ever done psychotropics and had so of course you don't have to answer this. Have you ever done psychotropics, mushrooms or something like that and had an altered state of consciousness through that kind of state?
When I was really young, I did LSD a few times, and then I didn't like it. Felt like a loss of control of being able to sleep, actually, and I didn't like that it would make me stay up for days. And I just experimented with some friends, and I did it a few times, and that was it. I was like, no, I'm not interested in doing this. And I don't know, I think DMT was something completely different. We've actually done a show about it where I was like, that would be interesting to do, but I'm not entirely sure that I feel like I need to do it, to be honest right now. Like, I don't feel like I need to. Maybe some people feel like they need to.
I haven't done it. I haven't done DMT. I'm actually curious to do it, although I have control issues. So that was one of my issues with LSD when I was young. Control issues on LSD lead to a bad trip.
Yeah. I just didn't like that I couldn't sleep, and I was pulling like a 48-hour. I was like, I want to sleep and I can't. It was making me like paranoid and having issues, and I didn't like that.
The paranoia
adrenochrome's
is
the way
bad.
to go, guys. Adrenochrome's the way to go.
What's adrenochrome?
No, I'm kidding. It's a chemical.
I'm like, what is
that?
It's
super stimulant produced by the pituitary thyroid. I don't remember. But people like, could be the pineal gland. I don't know. It's some chemical. It's the hormone that's released that kicks your adrenaline glands on.
Okay.
So
if you ingest that, it will like kick your adrenaline glands on full blast.
Can that wear your adrenal glands out if you're putting them in a hard drive?
I would imagine,
probably.
Yes, myself.
It's probably not good for your kidneys either.
No.
Adrenal issues are a big deal these days too.
Yeah, they are. Because a lot of people exercise and go crazy, and they don't eat the good fats and healthy food, and they exhaust their adrenals.
They load up on low-fat food and get all those bogus carbs. Yeah.
Exactly.
But when you did way back when you did LSD, did it open your mind up in any way that was
You were never the same afterwards.
I can say
right?
for me that it changed my outlook. It did, even though, and I stopped doing it because I started to have like that paranoia stuff creep in, and I don't like that feeling at all.
No.
And that's where I felt out of control.
Well, it did, in the fact that, I mean, there was one time where I actually decided to walk home in the dark from this place to my family's house, which is kind of crazy. I mean, I'm like hallucinating, but I'm like I did it. And
Yeah.
and I'm walking through this park, and I'm walking. It's probably took me like 2 hours to do a 20-minute walk. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden this dog starts like running out of the shadowed area of the trees, and I was like, "Oh, where'd that dog come from?" And it's running, and I'm watching it, and it's got this like, it's just movement was just so, it was like magical. And then I was like, "Oh, hi, doggy," and all of a sudden it just goes woof and disappears, and I was like, that was probably like I hadn't had a hallucination on it that intense. Things were actually fairly subtle. And when I
That's amazing.
yeah, when I woke up, when I like later when I was more sober, I was like, "Hey." I'm like, "What? Like, if chemicals can make you do that, maybe like, like I don't think that explains every kind of phenomenon that everyone's having as a hallucination, because then you'd have to explain group hallucination and all that stuff." But w- but it was like, what is going on that I was able to see that. But I did notice that something interesting about when you're doing LSD is that your pupils are severely dilated. And
That's
so
true.
Yes.
That's true of almost
and
all entheogens.
Yeah. So it's like you're severely dilated. And so I don't do a lot of research on that, but I remember thinking, oh, I'm guessing the fact that I'm letting so much light into my eyes all the time is probably a reason why I'm hallucinating.
Well, maybe you're
So
actually able to perceive the fringe of the spectrum with
Of the visible
of the
to
visible
us.
spectrum
yeah.
when you've got your eyes that dilated. That
Mhm.
I did acid when I was a kid, when I was a teen, and it was it's what people say. Well, I don't know how to put this one. When you do it as a teenager, you don't look at the world different. You look at the world differently from that day after, forever.
Yeah.
I knew there was something underneath reality when I did acid,
hmm
because I saw the patterns of it. I saw basically the Matrix.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yes, same here.
it's just one of those. I think of it as like a rites of passage for kids, and I think that's why it's illegal too.
Yeah.
We can't have all these free thinkers running around.
Well, it does. It leads it, definitely, and there is something to be said about the structure of this reality. So we
hmm
know that we only perceive a small spectrum of visible light, and outside of that spectrum, there's stuff going on because we have
Yes.
technology now to look through, infrared and all that, and so. Um, I think that, and especially, and then people who get involved in doing like magic stuff and active imagination. I mean, I can wrap this up in a lot of different packages, the terminology, but it all comes back to how we're perceiving the environment around us and how can we interact with it in a way that possibly shifts things to our liking. I mean, that's what magic is trying to be the one in control, even if you're in essence letting go, as some of the Zen stuff is letting go to let it happen.
hmm
That's still an exercise in will. You're still letting
Yes.
go.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
that's where so that's all. I think that for me, that always brings up like the end of this section of Nox Mente is kind of beyond this state of where we are now, and of course the obvious is death, but that's kind of that. And then we usually will get into some woo woo if there's some that came up. We did find some woo woo here, and questions.
I have questions. I would like to hear more about your paranormal research stuff and how you've worked that into your podcast now, and your general thinking, has
Well,
matured, I'm sure, since then.
yeah. I mean, I started out in graphic design, and I got in with I started a group called the Curious 14 originally with Matt Cook. and I start writing on that blog, and then it dispersed. Everyone dispersed to do their own things, and John and I had done some shows on Where Did the Road Go? Took me a while to remember that, but I had written some blogs, and I never saw myself as a researcher. I just someone, the Curious 14 needed someone to write, and I was like, well, I can write. I've written lots of history essays and stuff like that, so I write, and I don't know that I'm always like 100% accurate, but I seem to get into more liking to look at occult ideas, and that's appeared in the podcast that I do now. So, I mean, from Where Did the Road Go? My friend John Chadwick is an illustrator, and he was just like, "Well, we should do some kind of project," and we just started developing it because I was like, "Well, what can you do with the skills that we have?" And the fact that, I mean, John, my podcast partner, is he was an acting, he did mediumship, and so he's all into this sort of stuff. And I have, family that did medium stuff, and I lived in a haunted house when I was like younger on the East Coast. So those sort of things just unplanned just sort of came into this project to do it. And we just decided, well, why don't we draw people's, like, that's no one's doing that. Why doesn't John sketch authors stuff, and maybe they can use it, maybe they don't want to, we can put it up, we can have prints, it's a possibility of products, or people might actually like this stuff, and then we get to talk to people and learn stuff and interview and develop more skills that we don't necessarily have. I would like to write more and do stuff, but it's timing, and the time's being spent. I do a lot of the stuff, the editing, the show, the website, the design stuff, and putting everything together, and the questions and the research, and so there's not a lot of time for writing, but we do have a space in our blog. We're actually doing an experiment with our show, and we did a pilot show where we were testing, but the sound didn't work out, so we never released it. And on that show, it was called Families Visiting from Beyond the Grave. And so we were just discussing that topic, and we told a story about this cat that was like a curse. And it was from Oxenby, England. And we think it was just like a mythical story, that it never actually, the manor house didn't exist, but it was this cat that was mutilated, boiled alive, and it returns to forewarn the people of the manor of impending death that's going to happen to family members. And so we were sort of doing this little experiment, because John drew a picture of him, and we never got to release it. So we've sort of doing, because we were fond of the drawing, where we called it Oxenby, where the cat is now a staff member. So we're going to take him, and he's going to be writing blog posts and stuff on our site to see if we can kind of do like a little cat talk. But we're doing an experiment to see if Oxenby actually like can hold like an energy. We're doing a test where we're creating him as an actual person on our staff. And so that's sort of a neat, I'm not writing a blog, but we're sort of like, okay, well, let's experiment with this and see what happens in this form of this character.
Is it going to be represented physically?
It's represented as a drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, so he's on there as a staff member picture, so he's there, and then he's going to be doing writing. And I'm going to have a random person that nobody knows, perhaps writing on his behalf, or perhaps multiple people.
It's a fake character.
Yeah, I love this.
Okay,
I love it.
I went a completely different way. Right. It's a thought form or a servitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're like doing a little experiment with it to see if you talk about something so much, and Oxenby's not really real, does it become real?
It does somewhat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Apparently in this thing
it's
called
the whole observation thing.
The noosphere is where it goes.
Yes.
All right, I had a question actually from Oswald Spengler. Wanted to ask if are you related to the writer and occult sci-fi podcaster J.F. Martell?
No, I'm not. Martell's actually not my real last. It's not my family last name.
My
grandfather was in an orphanage when he was young, and he got taken on by this family named Martell. His last name was Walsh, and they stuck Martell on him Then they put him back in the orphanage, and they just didn't take the last name Martell. So we're actually not a Martell.
That's interesting. It's so
But
strange that
I like the last name, so I'm going to keep it.
yeah, it's a good last name.
Yeah.
It's just strange that that kind of thing happens.
Yeah, and this would have been in like the 40s or 30s or something like that. So that stuff happened all the time.
When my grandfather came over, they gave, his name was Emilio Donatello. They gave him a name, Danny Daniels.
Yeah, that's so common. Like the Ellis Island renaming was carrying on.
He's not even actually a blood relative. It's my mom's stepfather, so, but still.
Yeah.
I have no more questions.
That's it. Did you ask in the chat, Jer?
I did. There's no one in chat. We got a light show tonight. Now that we've started putting out the show in podcast format, so no one shows up to watch it.
Oh, so people tune in later when they can.
Yeah.
I see. I just clicked over. It looks like 17, 18.
Yeah, only Oswald's in here. I hope you know there's a porn star.
Oh, so they're lurkers.
There's actually 2 porn stars named Danny Daniels, or possibly 3. One's a transsexual.
Wow. Check out the bump on my head. Okay, I'm just reading.
Oh, that was from the mosquito bite I was talking about. See it?
Oh, and that's our personal chat. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I got no more questions. I think we're done. Great show. Another one in the can.
This was fun. Yeah, Melissa, thank you. I cannot believe how much great content you brought. This was, especially with the stuff I'm really super, super interested in. So at the top of my list is this, the fortuitous stuff. I keep trying to find a better word for it.
The synchronistic things.
Yeah, the synchronistic stuff, but the stuff that was tapping outside of time, space. So you're having the dreams about it, and then you're able to apply it in your waking life, or these things actually come to fruition in your waking life. It's uncanny, and the stories you brought.
I always just assumed that that's what dreams were for, but then I realized that a lot of people don't have those, or at least they don't remember, they don't use them. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's what my dreams are for.
It's a small percentage of people, at least that we've been talking to. I mean, they're there, but it's a very small percentage.
I think everyone's provided with this gigantic toolbox of things to use, and whether or not they pay attention to it, allow it into their awareness, or utilize those tools, it's up to them.
Well, one of the things that just off the top of my head, without really ruminating on this conversation with you, Melissa, is you weren't brought up in any real religious dogma.
No, I mean, I believe we all have that, especially in the West. I mean, it's hard to avoid the Christian background.
It's out there, but it wasn't pushed in you.
It's impossible.
It wasn't part of, like my mom, we didn't do church, we didn't do anything. It was very relaxed, and there was no religious preaching at all. There might have been, be on time and don't lie, but those are good things. So I didn't have that intense religious background at all. In fact, my family was fairly anti-religion for the most part because of the Catholic orphanage my grandfather was raised in and severely abused. So
where he got named Martell.
Yes, and they were very abusive, and my grandmother was in an orphanage for a while when she was older, and they were very, they were not fond of that, so they were not fond of that.
But I've noticed this with other people that have these kind of fortuitous, are able to take, have this ability, seem to have not had a lot of religious stuff pushed on them at a young age. It's definitely one of those underlying things I'm noticing.
Yeah. And I said, I had a more free-flowing, chaotic childhood, move around childhood, so not a structured one.
Yeah. And I'm sure that plays into it too. But you're really good at that. I would if I were you, I would be tapping into it even further, trying to push it.
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah.
So, all right. Well, I guess it's a wrap.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Melissa. Did you want to talk about anything of your stuff that you want?
Well, if anybody wants us to find us, you can find the podcast or anything about John or I. Just go to www.espirit.tv or come on our Facebook at Drawing Out the Spirits podcast.
And all these links are in the show notes and in our Discord server show note channel. And let's thank everyone who played along at home. and for our live studio audience. Please join us next week when we have Greg Carlwood from the Higher Side Chats as our guest. So until then, remember that downvotes are negative karma. So always give us a thumbs up. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Melissa.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Night.